Hey out there survivors, how are you all doing? Welcome back to another episode of Let's Survive Interviews. Today I am beyond honoured, like you don't even understand. This is such a big moment for me with this channel. I am speaking to Nick Apostolides, which I hope I probably butchered your name. I apologize. Apostolides. I'm not good with Greek names.
That's good right there. That's good.
Apostolides, cool. We got this.
Yeah. What's up?
How are you, Nick? Thank you so much for taking the time to come on the channel and chat. For people that aren't in the know, which I don't understand if they weren't, but you have been the voice actor for Leon Kennedy in the Resident Evil 2 remake, among many other things. I had looked through your credits earlier, and you've been acting for quite a while.
Yeah. A lot of people think when people kind of blow up into something, they say, "Wow, it came out of nowhere." No, we usually we're at the grind for 10 years, and that's kind of my story. I think I've been acting since about 2010, and you do a lot of little projects and some bigger ones. You try to work your way up, and then maybe, hopefully, you land like that one gig that really, really, really means a lot and gets you to a different level of like exposure. And that's kind of what the video game world has offered for me.
Which is awesome, because I always say that about stuff. It's the whole iceberg metaphor, like that everybody sees the tip of the iceberg. They don't see all the stuff underneath that got the iceberg above water.
Exactly. That's a perfect metaphor for what we do. But I mean, you as well, you're a filmmaker. You understand what that's like.
I do. And I mean, I'm still, I have to say I've been doing this 6 years, just coming up on 6 years since made my first short film. And I haven't had like a massive success, but for example, like getting to world premiere at Fright Fest last year, which is like one of the biggest horror convention festivals in the UK. That was like my holy crap, this is going somewhere moment.
Yeah, well, look, it's onwards and upwards, and the film and TV industry, the acting industry in general, it's high risk and high reward, for sure. And you have to kind of see every single little success as a success. It's all building blocks into something much bigger. And some of the biggest success stories that we hear of, like, people were grinding for 20-25 years, and then they just get that big break that everyone knows them for, and that's the rest is history. And so it's a war of attrition to stay in this crazy industry. And as long as you have that kind of level of persistence and that stubbornnness, I think that's what you need to get where you want to go. That's my opinion.
Definitely. I always try to tell my actor friends, I have a bunch of actor friends here who've worked on a bunch of my projects and stuff, and they sometimes get to that little moment of kind of like, is this working? Should I just go back to doing the day job and everything? And I'm like, I always use the metaphor or not the metaphor, but like the story of Alan Rickman, like that, like he was just a theater actor. He'd done some cool theater, but he wasn't like a household name. And then at 41, I think it was, he got Die Hard. And it's like, then he was everywhere. He was Severus Snape. Like, so you're totally right. And I love, one of my favorite things since I started doing these interviews is when I chat to people, especially in this field, in this industry, there's so many inspiring stories, which I think is super important for people to hear, because I do think people do get into this state sometimes of, it worked for that person, why can't it work for me? And it's like, you have to understand that everybody struggles with this stuff, but it's just, as you say, the persistence, the graft, the hard work that gets you to the other side of it.
Exactly. I've been out in LA for about 7 to 8 years, and this is a good message for people who are trying to do what we do. Over the years, I've met a few actors on jobs who are, I would say, B-list actors, and you've seen them in things, you've seen their faces. And I would talk to them early on, and they would say, look, Nick, the one thing that they have in common with their friends who are also have been in the industry for 20 years, gotten big movies and stuff like that, they said the one thing they had in common wasn't looks, wasn't even talent necessarily. It was persistence. They just stayed at it, and they didn't quit. And over time, they got their breaks, and all those little breaks add up to a career.
That's it.
And so you got to stick with it. This industry is not for the thin-skinned whatsoever.
Oh, tell me about it.
there have been times where, like, I even did a bunch of cool projects, a lot of commercials, action projects, and I could have walked away realizing a couple of my goals. I could have said, you know what, that was fun. I spent 5 years in LA. I had a blast. Let's do something different. I would have been happy. But I stuck in it like another couple of years, and then I booked this little project called Resident Evil. And
I'm not sure if I've heard of it. I know, yeah.
it happens to be my favorite franchise. So if I had left LA, I would have been pretty happy, yeah. But I wouldn't have looked back at my life 20 years later and been like, I did that project. And that's how I feel with, I mean, look at this.
Yeah, that jacket. We need to talk about this. Yeah, the jacket. We need to talk about it.
I've never worn it before. I got this on a trip, and I saw it on the rack, and it was pretty expensive, and I was like, I don't care, I gotta buy it, like, whatever. So, and it's actually reversible too. Jeez. Well, it's the whole bird, the made in heaven thing on the inside. I don't want to take it off.
Yeah.
It's awesome, and you know what? It kind of looks good, especially on this new camera I have.
It does. And the HD camera really brings out the jacket. It does, and I love seeing the Leon's bulletproof vest and everything up behind you. What I loved about it was when I was looking at it, like the scratch mark across the back, like the fact that it's scuffed and worn is awesome. Like that it's not just this pristine, clean, Oh yes, there we go.
Baby right there. This took me months to make, and the distressing of all this and the blood splats, that was the funnest part. I used a blowtorch, sandpaper, razors, and I just scratched up the whole thing, and it had to look tattered,
Yeah. I mean, that's one of my favorite things when we're making any kind of film project is designing props, working on props. My favorite thing, personally, for me, is I'm a diehard horror fan, have been since I was a small kid. And I love doing makeup effects and gore effects and stuff when we're making movies. I just want to get my hands in and get dirty. I don't want to leave everything to the makeup crew. I'm like, no, I got to get blood on me somewhere. Like, it's got
the same way. I started acting in low budget films on the East Coast and like around Boston, New England.
Yeah.
And I know you know what low budget is like. And
yes.
Oftentimes, like when we were doing like either sci-fis or post-apocalyptic or like gritty films, those are my favorite types anyways, but everything was too clean. When you're doing a post-apocalyptic movie and some actors' hands aren't dirty, I'm like, what kind of post-apocalyptic future is this where everybody washes their hands and sanitizes it? I'm like, no, get some dirt under your fingernails.
Under your nails,
I'm such a sucker for detail like that. And so yeah, I'm the same way, and that's why when I was designing this, I actually have the material and all the files for a huge BTS promo of how I made this thing.
Nice.
Whole process from the research to the designing and everything. I haven't put it together. It's not like I haven't had the time in quarantine. Maybe one day I will, but I'm excited to just wear this thing again whenever conventions start up.
As you said, you've had the time in quarantine to do that, but what you've done, what I've seen you do in quarantine, because I follow you over on Twitter, is incredible artwork, which it blew my mind. I saw the art and I just like reshared it, and I was chatting to our mutual friend Petrichor Crown, Jack, and was like, oh my god, this art is amazing. And he's like, that's the guy who does the voice of Leon. And I was like, I didn't realize. And that moment, like, it hit me. I was like, Jesus, you just have a wealth of talent, don't you?
Oh, thank you. I was a hobby kid growing up, and I just tried so many different things. Like my grandfather used to say, get into as many things as you can in life, because you never know what you're going to be good at, and you never know what you're going to love. And so I loved the arts growing up, because my mom is a really crafty person, really artistic. My dad is a jack of all trades. And so I just grew up in a very creative household. And so I was surrounded by it. And so I started drawing when I was like 2.5 years old.
Whoa.
I would always have a crayon or a marker in my hand. I was never great. I was good for my age back then, and I would just doodle and sketch. But it wasn't until later on in my life where I started to really pay attention to lines and whatnot. And then when I started acting, to be honest, I still kept some of my hobbies like guitar and cooking and all that stuff. But drawing took when I say backseat, I mean I threw it out of my life.
Oh no,
I,
yeah,
I, I didn't even tell people anymore that I drew, because it just wasn't something. It wasn't a hobby that I nurtured anymore.
Mm.
And in quarantine, a friend of mine challenged me, and they're like, if you love art, like, why don't you do a piece again? And I was like, oh yeah, let's see if the old man still got it, And I did a tribute piece to my favorite illustrator, Stephen Gamble. He illustrated
Oh
the
yeah.
Scary Stories books back in the day.
Oh, they're
I don't know if
amazing. They're
so you
so
read those.
good. I bought them for my daughter recently because Scary Stories wasn't very big here in Europe. It wasn't. Well, it wasn't the phenomenon that it was in the US. But
Yeah.
I saw the movie at Fright Fest. My daughter's big into horror movies as well. She's 9, and I have to vet everything that she's allowed to watch. But I saw Scary Stories, and I was like, I think she'd enjoy this. So to kind of prep her for it, I bought the books. And that artwork, is that the piece that you're talking about with the balloon?
Well, I got it right here. I'll show
Oh,
you.
nice.
But yes, so I grew up with those books.
That's
when
amazing.
when I was like 8, 9, 10, 11 years old, I would have sleepovers with my best friends in elementary school, and we would read those books at night to scare the bejesus out of ourselves. And those images just always
Oh,
stuck with me.
they're
Look,
so
I have
good.
them. Jeez, I have them right here.
No way, like the pale lady is the perfect example of that. Like she is terrifying.
These are these are my books right here. Like
Nice.
I still read them, and the imagery is awesome. And then so as a first like return back to my drawing, I said, why don't we just do a tribute to Stephen Gamble, because he's my hero. And so this was my first one that I did.
I love this so much. I featured this on the community spotlight, along with some of your other work, but I just love it. It
Thank
is
you.
now that you've said the inspiration, it immediately, because when I saw it, I was like, I love this art style. It's so surreal. It's so interesting. And now that you've said it, it could totally be one of those pages. You know what I mean? You're just waiting for the text on the other side. You know?
Oh, thank you. I mean, it was a carbon copy. Like I wanted to do him justice, because his style, it was so horrifying.
Yeah.
It's just like there's such a disturbing nature to all of his art, and
Yep.
I just think it's like it's everything I love in horror, because I'm a huge horror fan too. I'm seldom impressed with horror movies. There's only a select few that I think are really done well and unsettle me that same way. But I think video games do it better because you're playing them. I think that's why I fell in love with Resident Evil, with Silent Hill,
Yeah.
and games like that, because they just made me feel so uneasy.
I
Better
get
than
you.
movies.
I'm actually at that stage now. Like, I mean, I love, my favorite thing about horror films is not being scared anymore, because, well, like, that's not my favorite thing about them, but what I mean is, I'm not really scared by horror movies anymore, but what I go to horror for now is interesting themes, like Get Out, like Us. Like, I like when you take something like a bigger political issue or a social issue, and you make something like an interesting piece of, and you can do that in horror because it's still kind of fantasy. Whereas if you do it as like a drama, or it's too much, it's too real. But when you've got this kind of fantasy element, and that's even my own film, that was entirely the purpose, was like, yes, this is about a big monster made out of baby parts, which is quite a horrific thought, but it's really about the social climate in Ireland, like a couple of years ago, and what was going on here. Because to me, that's what. But games, as you just said, horror movies I go to for this interesting discussion. Games I go to have the absolute shite scared out of me.
Yeah. That's what these, like, especially survival horror, that's what it does. Even games like Dead Space, I don't know if you've ever played those.
Oh my god, yes.
Those are terrifying. If you play those by yourself, those aliens coming at you, it's like in the dark with the noises that they utter and the shrieks and everything. It's like, those are horrifying.
Oh, and the music in that game is super just like disturbing. It's just like, it reminded me of like, it's what I always felt like the Hellraiser score should have been more like, which is just clangs and noise and just horrible industrial sound. Like,
Well, speaking of that, like, speaking of diving into atmospheres and worlds, that's the reason I loved Resident Evil VII so much, was because when that was the first, I never played like Alien Isolation. Now I want to, because I know what it is.
Yeah.
But that was the first time that I was really submerged 100% into a different world because of the headset. in the head.
Yes, so
So
scary.
you are no longer sitting in your living room. You are inside of that damn mansion in the southeast there, and trying to escape like this crazy ass family. And for me, that experience with the sound design especially,
Yes.
I would take my headset off after like 3 hours, 4 hours of playing. I'd be a little queasy, but I would almost forget that I was sitting in my living room. It would surprise me.
Yeah.
I would take it off, and I feel the rug underneath my feet. I see my brother sitting there. I'm like, holy shit, where did I just go?
Yeah, that's exactly it.
That means they successfully put me there, and I
Yeah.
love that feeling.
I mean, it's really funny because there's only a couple of games really as well in the last, like, I keep talking about this, there's a couple of games in the last decade that really proper scared me on like a different level. Like, not just jump scares happen to me all the friggin' time, but that like terror inside that you go to bed and can't stop thinking about it. They were Dead Space, funnily enough. Outlast. When I first played Outlast, I was like, this whole mental hospital. Oh yeah, it's messed up. I wish there was a VR mode for it because it would be so good in VR. But then yeah, Resident Evil 7. Resident Evil 7 was like, as you say, it was the Texas Chainsaw of it all. It was so weird. Like, I remember when I first heard about it, I was like, I don't know how I feel about this. Like, this is not Resident Evil to me. This is not. And then I'll never forget, once I started playing and I got like the Scorpion key or whatever it was, I was like, oh, this is Resident Evil. This is 100% Resident Evil. It's just taken on a new form. It's evolved.
It was disturbing, and I gotta say, as an attestament to what they were able to do psychologically with that game, especially like for the people who have never experienced it in VR, I feel bad for them.
Yeah.
Because when I was filming RE2, the same producing team was on RE2 that did 7, and they pleaded with me. I hadn't played it yet, and it came out while we were filming it, and they were like, "Listen, don't play that game without VR." I said, "Okay, I'll listen to you. You guys are
the
legends."
creators, yeah.
And I understand why. And it's because they didn't want me to spoil the whole story without VR, because the VR puts you into the world. And I gotta say, the Baker family, like that cast, the writing of that story was so successful, because Jack Baker, he was just like a country boy.
Yeah.
He wasn't even that naturally intimidating.
Yeah.
But I think his stalking in that mansion was more terrifying than Mr. X in RE2.
Our nemesis, I agree.
That's like I haven't played that yet, for a specific reason.
Okay.
But you know, Mr. X is like a BOW, and he's stomping after you, and he Jack Baker is just like a eat your supper, Ethan. And still, like, any time that he's stalking you, like, my heart was pounding because I didn't want to get hit by a shovel or whatever he was holding. You know, it's like, geez, and he breaks through walls. That's terrifying.
I'm watching one of my close friends play it on Twitch at the moment, and he's just gotten to where you fight Jack and with the chainsaw effectively. And he is justifiably so absolutely terrified. He's like, this guy is like, how do I kill this thing? What the hell?
Yeah, and he's not even that like innately scary. He's not a big scary monster with claws and fangs and all that stuff. He's just a dude.
I think that's what makes him scarier. I think, like, it's the fact that, as you say, it's just this. It's what we've been conditioned to over the years in horror movies. Is the killer is not always a big monster. The killer is your neighbor, the guy 2 houses down, who you always thought was a bit odd, but like you'd never say it to them.
So kudos to them. For anyone that hates on RE7, I guess I kind of get it, but not really. Because
I'd be the very same, man. And it's like, I always say, like, anything that I do dislike, I just don't talk about, because there's enough negativity in the world. So like, why bother going out and like ragging on stuff that I dislike when I could just be championing and talking about stuff that I do? And so that's why I kind of push myself to be like. But like, I think this is a good way as well of getting into talking a little bit about Resi 2, because I will tell you that straight up front, one of my... Actually, I'll tell you 2 things. We'll go with this one first. This is a weird thing to be saying. When I first played Resident Evil 2 in 1998, yes, I think that's when it released in Europe, Uh, I didn't love it. And what happened was, it was a very classic case. This happened to me with Silent Hill as well, right? That I was so attached to the first game because I got it. It was the first 3D type game I ever played. And same with Silent Hill, that moved again, and we weren't in pre-rendered backgrounds, we were in a 3D environment. That when I played the second ones of each of these games, I was like, it's not the characters I love, it's not this, it's not that. And I was very piney about that, like, where's Chris, where's Jill, where's Harry, and now, so I would always kind of be like, yeah, I wasn't a huge fan, etc. Now, I did this thing with both of those games where 10 years after release, so around 2007, 2008, I replayed Resident Evil 2 when I was binging the series, and I was like, yeah, I just didn't get this at the time, but this is a goddamn masterpiece. Like, when I reevaluated it, taking myself away from like what I felt as a 14-year-old versus what I could feel as like a 24-year-old, I was like, yeah, wow, I missed this entirely. But I'd love to know what your... I'm curious, I guess, what your first experience with Resident Evil 2 was like as a player, you know, as a young dude, because you would have been around 14 too, right?
Yeah, my cousin told me about Resident Evil 1 when it came out, and at the time my mom didn't let me play it because I was too young, and I was bragging. She said, well, that sounds like a bad game. What is it about? And I was like, well, it's about zombies and you blow people's heads off. And she's like, no, you're not playing that game. And it just kind of like, I didn't care about it too much because I had never played it, so I didn't know. And I said, oh, whatever. And then about a year later, when RE2 came out, my friend, I slept over his house, and I'd always play video games at his house. And he had RE2, and he said, you want to play the zombie game? I was like, oh yeah, that's the one I never got to play. Yeah. So the first one I ever played was
RE2, yeah.
And I just remember we started it up, and Leon is coming out of the fire there, like in that first section with the police cars, and the zombies stand up, and I was like, whoa, this is intense. And then you go in, you get the shotgun and everything. It's like, that was just like, it changed everything for me, and I fell in love. And then I enjoyed that so much that I went back to play the first one. I was like, wow, this series is no joke. And then the third one came out a year later. I introduced my cousin Garrett to it in 1999. We played 3 all the way through, and I was just sold. Then my little brother was born sometime around there, and then RE4 came out, and it's just like, the rest is history.
Yeah, exactly. It's interesting because like I've always said that like RE3 of the classic series, RE3 was my favorite just because that was the one that for whatever reason connected with me. I just replayed it over and over and God knows how many times. And but the funny thing is, as I say, there's something about recontextualizing something in your head. Like when I went back to RE2, and as I say, had removed myself, and I was like, man, you know, the voice acting's so great. Like, Paula Did's doing amazing work, you know, and Alison Court is phenomenal as Claire. I remember being like, oh, I'm not sure how I feel about Claire. She's not a great character. I replayed it 10 years later. I was like, Claire is an amazing character. She's our original Ethan because she's just an everyday person, like a college student caught up in all this. And it was an amazing experience to kind of look at it through a different lens, a bit more mature. But I always say that I think that you are definitely most influenced by the first game in a series that you play, because it's like the Final Fantasy series. Whenever I talk to people, I'm like, what's your favorite? And if they say 9, 8, or whatever, 7, of course, I'm like, I reckon that was like the first one they played, because that's me. First one I played was 7, and I ended up I have that tattooed on my back. I have the meteor tattooed on my back.
Really? That's cool. I like that.
I have 11 tattoos, and I think 9 of them are video game related.
I have yet to get my first one, but as a tribute to what my life has been like for the past couple of years, I was considering an RPD.
Oh, nice! Yes, that would be epic. I actually have a friend here who said
I saw that in the background. I was going to ask you, Flicker.
A fan of the channel, a friend and fan of the channel, sent me like a care box full of goodies, like a Dead by Daylight hat and a Tomb Raider mouse mat from 1998 and this plushy liquor. Incredibly detailed. I'm delighted. And the funny thing is, where I was going with that story about Resi 2 is that I was maybe more excited for Resi 2 because the first game didn't connect with me right out the gate. I wasn't one of the people that was like, they better not ruin my favorite game. They better not just, I was not there. I was like, oh my god, they're redoing that game. That's awesome, because I have had a weird history with it. I am willing to go into this totally for whatever Capcom decide to do, you know what I mean? And then what I loved was the honoring of the original game, but then the new as well. Like, it wasn't a retread. And to me, that's super important. With any type of remake or of any art, at least it can be its own thing.
Yeah, I think they did a really good job. I mean, it's been received extremely well. I think it's been received well, even better than RE3. Now, I haven't played 3. I'm gonna love it. I know I am, because of just for a lot of reasons, but I just gotta wait until I can be physically with my brother and my cousin. That's kind of our tradition. We play the new games. So I bought it on day one. I bought it, but I haven't played it yet. So
I love that. Because I miss, like, me and my cousin and my best friend. That was always our tradition, and we've all just kind of, life has torn us in very different directions. And it's one thing that the Twitch live stream and everything is allowing me, is again a chance to play games with people that I've not necessarily been able to be in the same room with anymore and stuff. But I think you're going to really enjoy RE3. I mean, for me, my favorite thing about it is definitely performances as well, and cast. I think Capcom are doing such an incredible job, obviously yourself included, with casting these characters. But I told you the last day when we were chatting that I was in the middle of doing. I'm trying to mix it up for myself, so I'm playing it on PC at the moment, RE2, in first person, which is very odd, but it's definitely scarier for me, because, like, the first time I came across a liquor is 4,000 times more tricky to deal with in first person, which is why they didn't go first person as well. One of the reasons is, like, those type of enemies are not suited to that perspective, but that just makes it all the scarier for me.
that game would be awesome in VR.
Oh my god, yes.
It'd be intense.
And imagine, like, it'd be great for you, because you're just there and you're like, I don't need to see Leon. I am Leon. What are you on about?
Yeah, well, I'm excited for 8 for that reason, though. I like the fact that RE is adopting VR. I think it's the future of horror.
Definitely.
And again, for people that have not tried 7 in VR, you are missing out. There's purists, if you call them, that they were upset about the tank controls changing. And the thing is, like, games are evolving, whether you want them to or not. They're evolving and for the better, I think. I mean, it's all about immersion. Games were, I think that was the goal from way back when, was to have the most immersive experience. And I don't think there's anything more effective in horror than putting you right there as the person. And it's more effective than a first person, like, POV, just because it makes the world around you disappear.
Yeah. Oh, definitely. Because, when you're playing a first-person horror not in VR, you can still look away from the screen. You can still just go, like, I don't want to see that, and look away. When you're in VR, you look to the left and you're like, shit, I'm still here. No.
Yes, that's the point, is, like, there's nothing to distract you. There's no roommate walking by, no one turning on a light at night, or a siren going by to remind you, or the birds chirping outside. It's like, no, you are there.
Yeah. I think you'll appreciate...
I don't know how else to say it.
I think you'll appreciate this then, because when there is an outside influence, it's so much worse. Because I was playing Resident Evil VII when I rebought my VR. When I went to the States for a festival in January, I had to sell a load of things just to get the money for the trip. And VR took a hit, but I was like, I'll buy it back, I'll get it back again. But I was replaying Resident Evil 7, and I'm, like, walking around the house, and I'm freaking out, terrified, like. And next thing, my 4-year-old daughter comes into the living room and, like, places her hand on my knee while I'm in this world. And
freaked out, didn't you?
She's lucky she didn't get, like...
That's what I mean. That's what you forget you're there.
Yeah, because I was terrified. I was like, what is on my leg? It's like having a dream where there's, like, if anybody can ever relate to this, where you're having a dream where there's, like, things crawling on you and you wake up and you're sure they're still there. That's what it's like. It's terrifying.
I think I have a video when we were playing RE7. I I made my brother play it. We played it together, and he was younger. He was maybe about like 18 at the time, or 19 or something. And I had him play the part with when Mia comes up the stairs from
Oh,
the cellar.
yes.
That was probably one of the best early scares.
Definitely.
And he heard the noise, and then when she came up and he turns around and she's right there with that crazy face. At that point, I think I poked him in the rib and he screamed like to high hell. It was so funny. Oh my God.
That's
You
so
can really
good.
mess with people.
But like, there's another great moment in that game that is so reminiscent. Like, Capcom are so good at wearing their influences on their sleeves. Like, they're horror fans, and they're not ashamed of it, or they're not ashamed to kind of borrow little elements. That moment coming up the stairs, you just get like such Evil Dead vibes from. Like, it's so the Deadite in the basement. Like, that's what Mia's face looks like. It's terrifying.
It was
But like, the reason that I wanted to kind of segue a little bit into RE2 as well is, I am as a film director and stuff. What fascinates me with this whole where video games have gone now, and it's actually something that I've been considering trying to pivot myself career-wise a little bit into, is like mocap and cinematics. Like, I just think this stuff is fascinating beyond words. A couple of my guests so far have been mocap actors, and I just think to me, it's it should be the dream of an actor, to just like, you are giving the purest possible performance. Like, you are interacting with things, but you're not necessarily in the props and the costume, but everything is your imagination. And I'd love to hear about that process from you, like the whole, like, what it's like being directed by a director for mocap and stuff.
Well, it's interesting. For that job, I've never been on stage. I'm not a theater actor. And that project probably tested my imagination more than any other thing, because again, you're not physically on set. You don't have the wardrobe on. You're in this funny suit with markers all over it and little shiny balls, and you got to imagine everything's there. Now, it helps that I was very familiar with the Resident Evil universe, so it wasn't that much of a stretch to just remember the games for me. But the director comes from a theater background. He's a Shakespearean trained actor and director.
Oh, wow.
And he's a very talented guy, and he had us focus. Tom is his name. He's fantastic. And he had us focus just simply on the human interaction of it all. He said, don't think about this as a video game. Don't think about it as anything else. Just really focus on the scene work, what's happening in the scene, what does this character mean to you, and just how would you react in real life? That's all. So he broke it down in very simplistic terms.
That's so cool, though.
Where I was expecting somebody to be like, remember when Leon did this and now he's got to save the day and all this stuff. No, it was just very grounded. They wanted every performance to be grounded, suspending the disbelief that zombies are trying to eat your face. But he would always just say, if this was to happen in real life, how would you react?
I love hearing this, because definitely, I mean, like, as I say, it's just, to me, video games, you said it yourself a while ago, and I'll echo it again, which is that video games are evolving, as a medium. Everything about them, I mean, we've been playing for, kind of 30 years, and in that time, like, they have changed from Mario running and jumping and hitting blocks with his head, like, to just to cite it because I keep going on about it, like The Last of Us 2, which is this giant world, and like there's this engaged massive story, and like the evolution has been crazy. And I think a lot of people can't quite process that either. I think a lot of people get stuck in kind of like, no, this is what a video game should be, and it's like, guess what we're realizing? A video game can be just about anything now. Like, we're still in the early days of this medium. That's the crazy thing about it.
Yeah, it's changing quite a bit, and I like the direction it's going. I like the realism of it, because it's, I mean, pretty soon we'll be controlling our own avatars, I think.
Yeah.
And then we'll realize we're all just in the Matrix anyways. I think we're just getting close to realizing that, possibly. I don't know.
Well, if 2020 is an example of like a glitch in that system, so
Looking a glitch.
But yeah, like I guess one like just something to kind of talk about is like well, actually, no. I was going to ask you what emerging technologies interest you, but I think you kind of spoke to that with the VR side of things. So kind of taking it outside of Resident Evil again and going back to like, I mean, I did notice when I was looking at your credits list, as you said, you were in some horror movies and some like, sci-fi dark movies. What are some of your favorite like horror movies? Like, what are the ones that speak to you or that were like you grew up with, live in your head?
The ones that live in my head. I think my favorite that scared me was my first rated R movie I ever watched, and that was Terminator 2.
Wow.
My uncle showed that to me when I was really young.
It's always an uncle. It's always an uncle with Terminator 2.
Yeah, he was the cool uncle growing up, and the T-1000 scared me for weeks. I saw that movie when I was maybe about 8 or 9 years old, and that still holds up. That movie doesn't feel dated when you watch it. You notice that?
Yeah,
it's one
incredible.
of the few that don't feel dated. That was made in 1991 or 2. I consider that a horror movie. That's a horror sci-fi.
Yeah.
I think.
I totally agree. I do agree.
It's got a very dark tone to it. Then I watched the first one after that. So I love the Terminator franchise, the Alien franchise.
Oh, yes.
I like a lot of movies from the 80s and 90s that used a lot of practical effects. The Thing was horrifying.
The Thing is my personal favorite movie of all time. Like if somebody asks, like they always go, look, I know it's very hard to pick one, but what's your favorite? I'm like, The Thing. Like The Thing.
It's the tone of them. I'm a tone guy.
Yeah.
I care less about the main villain, the antagonist, or that, or this or that. I care about the tone, how a movie makes me feel. Some of the slasher movies back in the 80s, like some of those franchises, I'll always go back to and like them, like Halloween, Friday the 13th, like the sequels of those, and like Freddy and all them. The Ring from like around 99 or
the Japanese one, yeah.
Even the American one. It was PG-13.
Really? Yeah.
It's PG-13. That movie scared me. The Exorcist, Jaws. Now, as we get into genre-bending horrors, they're doing some interesting things. They push CGI a little too hard, and it loses me. I like when they go back to practical effects a lot. Yeah. Some notable films that I've seen in the past couple years have been, I loved A Quiet Place, because that broke a mold, and it used sound as basically the antagonist was sound. They built that world masterfully. Let's see, I like the original Conjuring. That was pretty cool. Hereditary.
The hide and clap scene in Conjuring, like that is one of those iconic horror set pieces now. Like
that was pretty cool. The Descent, like I like movies that do some different things, and those are good. But some of the older ones I think are the best. Yeah. Even Jaws. Jaws was an unsettling movie, and that was like the late 70s.
And again, there was no like the greatest thing. Every time you go back to Jaws, you're just reminded that like
no CGI.
And there was no shark for so much of it, like because it's a master lesson. And even when I made my movie, my second film, people kept saying in the edit, they're gonna want to see the creature more. They're gonna want to see the creature more, and I'm like, go watch Jaws again. Like it's not. Attention. Yeah, Alien does the exact same thing. The original Alien, like the alien's on screen for about 4.5 minutes of the whole movie, but it doesn't matter. It's knowing it's there. And when you see John Hurt start holding his stomach, you're like, oh shit, stuff's about to go down.
Those were well done movies. They understood it. They didn't. Yeah, it was less about the monster itself and just the knowledge.
Yeah, 100. I totally agree. And it's funny because with my movie as well, I made a commitment to myself that like we wanted to go 98% practical effects. Like we only use CGI to like hide little defects with makeup or things like that. We didn't use it for like, we were like, if we're gonna make a monster, we want to make a monster. And this is something that I think you'd appreciate, is that like with casting that it was like I need an actor who will ask 4,000 questions, because a monster shouldn't just be somebody who's like, put me in a rubber suit and I'll go be a monster. they should be like, what's my motivation? What am I doing? What am I feeling? Because that's how you get a good monster. Like, but
well, before we move on, I'll just say I think this is what boils down to making a good horror movie is making a good movie, period.
yeah,
And it actually has to do with RE2 and what Tom, the director, was trying to emphasize, I think, is that all those movies that we were talking about, like Jaws, like Alien, if you think about it, the reason they were successful without a lot of monster on screen was because you had a good story to start with, you had a good vision, and you had good actors.
And great characters, great, like interesting.
Great characters. It's so many great things, great direction with the vision and everything.
Yeah.
That you cared about everything, including the monster.
Yeah.
Whereas some movies, they just say, hey, you want to see this big monster on screen? Come see our movie.
Yeah.
Everything else falls short. And that's what RE2 did too, is they didn't, they wanted to focus on like you caring about the characters and making it a human story. And oh yeah, it's Resident Evil, guys.
Yeah. And like that works really well in the sense that, as I say, I find especially in the remake that there are characters that I didn't get a great sense of because again, limitations, technological limitations, story, cutscenes were only starting out in 1998. Like they hadn't really nailed down the idea of a cutscene, But like characters like Sherry, characters like Annette, I felt got so much more evolved in this one as well, that I really started to understand those characters a lot more.
Yes. Yeah. Capcom wanted to really flesh out all the supporting cast. They wanted you to care about every single person in the story, not just throw them in as like, oh, here's somebody else. Here's another survivor. It's like, why are they there and why should we care about them when stuff happens to them?
And like Marvin, there's a great example of that, because I actually watched like the little clip that you put up, I think it was, of the mocap scene of you and the actor that played Marvin, like what was his name?
Chris Watson, and
Chris Watson.
He's phenomenal.
He is. He
breathed life into Marvin, and it wasn't a big role, but it was pretty integral.
It was, and again in the original game, there's like the one little cutscene with Marvin, really, and then you're kind of on your way. I loved coming back and checking on him and being like, "Oh God, please don't turn, please, I don't want to." Like that's the thing. When I care if I'm gonna have to kill Marvin or not, that's terrifying to me. I don't. To me, that's where horror lies. Horror doesn't lie in the monster, like the liquor, because you're going to kill the liquor. It's a big, scary looking thing, but you grow attached to people, and then it's like, maybe this is why The Thing is one of my favorite movies. You grow attached to people, and then the thought of like, oh, I might have to kill that person. It's terrifying.
They wrote good characters. Brent Friedman is the writer of the story, and he worked closely with Capcom, and they fleshed out really, really good characters.
It's a testament, it really is. And I guess actually, speaking about characters, I'm sure this is probably a question that you've been asked, and I apologize, but like, are there any other iconic characters that you'd love a crack at, like that you'd love to embody or take on the? Because I mean, let's not beat around the bush here. Leon Kennedy is an iconic as hell character,
Yeah, he is. You mean in the video game world?
I guess so. I mean, I think it's probably better if we make it a niche subject, I guess, because then again, it goes broad or as short as you want.
There are a lot of characters that I grew up loving.
Terminator.
When it comes to film, it's hard for me to say and believe it that like, oh, I could play a younger version of this as like in a prequel. I mean, some of my big inspirations growing up with like Indiana Jones.
Oh, nice.
John McClane from Die Hard, even Rambo. Not because he, like in the 80s, he became like a really machismo, macho guy, whatever. It's more of his intention from the very beginning, where he came back from Vietnam and whatever. I'm not going to get into that, but he was a fleshed out character back in the day, and then he went crazy. But for video games, I mean, some of my favorite franchises, like I think I would just more generally say I would die to be in a Castlevania game. The Belmont family is I just beat Symphony of the Night and Rondo of Blood. Those are great games. Symphony of the Night was awesome. I grew up with the original 3 on NES and then Castlevania 4 on Super Nintendo. If I know they don't really do a lot of mocap per se for like Mega Man games, and those are very Japanese, but I would die to voice anything in a Mega Man.
Big time. I'll say this quickly, that Mega Man is one of my favorite franchises. I want to get a Mega Man tattoo next. and
Grew up with it.
I have
That was my first major franchise I grew up with. Was
oh,
Capcom and Mega Man after
I
Mario.
if I ever get I have a script for a Dark Mega Man feature film. If I ever get it greenlit, I'll be giving you a shout, Nick.
Please.
My friends loved joking with me about this because even the other day, there's a great YouTube channel called Game Theory, and they did an episode about Mega Man. And my friend just messaged me and was like, "All I could think of was you when I saw this because you're the Dark Mega Man guy."
Mega Man is awesome. I still play those, and I got my little brother into them. He loves them. Anything like Metroid related, I would love to be in like a Metroid game or something. Obviously not Samus, but like maybe a villain or something. Who knows? I don't know. There are so many games.
Yeah. No, I appreciate that.
That I grew up with, and it's just hard. I could have a list, but those are games I would like to be in. Silent Hill as well.
Yeah, which hopefully, I mean, we do get a return to that world at some point because it's just such a phenomenal world that it's such a shame that it's been so long. It's been weird to see Resident Evil continue to grow and continue to gain momentum, and Silent Hill is just kind of like the last one came out in 2012, and it's just like sailed away seemingly.
Too bad.
Yeah, you snooze.
They were right there in the pioneering world with the Resident Evil. They were just right behind them.
Yeah, it's just such a shame. But yeah, like I'm not going to keep you much longer because I know you have things as well. But what I will say is that where can people keep up with you? Like if they wanted to reach out about stuff, especially as I say about your art, if people are interested, especially in stuff like that.
Yeah. Right now, I mean, the whole thing with quarantine, it kind of came out of nowhere. This whole idea of like a little side business with commissions. If you asked me 5 months ago that I would be doing this, I wouldn't believe you. And so everything's kind of new. Right now, I'm caught up in doing the actual work with the sketching and also woodwork. I've been working with wood and crafting things for probably maybe 20 years now. And now I'm doing it for fun. I'm taking commissions on that. I haven't even posted it officially yet, but I also do wood signs, a lot of wood burning and stuff. And I'm kind of building my portfolio that I'll be posting soon.
Very
and right
cool.
now, I don't even have a site for all that stuff. So you can find anything that I do creatively right now just on Instagram, which I don't know if you can add maybe like the tags.
I'll put the links in the description.
Yeah, so just in the description, check out my Instagram or Twitter. You'll find all my stuff there, and you'll find out how to contact me. You can just message me right now. So I am taking orders. It's about it in between my travels, because I also work on a travel show where we go around the world and we help rebuild like community centers and structures to help the surrounding area in the countries. And right now we're grounded because of the pandemic, obviously. So I have a lot of free time. I'm taking orders, and if you like one, let me know.
Man, I feel like the great thing about ending an episode like this is I know I will probably want to speak to you again in the future, because there's so much even from that last paragraph of what you just said that I'm like, we could talk for another hour about stuff. So
it's a lot. I'm trying to catch up with it myself, trust me.
But Nick, genuinely, I mean this from the bottom of my heart. I also just want to give a quick shout out that one of my close friends who runs a podcast, Brooker411, he asked me when I was doing my live news show earlier, just to pass along, say thank you for your amazing work as Leon. And be honest, everybody that was on the live news show said the same. Samantha, who is the person that sent me the liquor, she said to send well wishes and kindness to you as well. So from all of
thank you. Right back at you guys. Right back at you.
From all of the survivors and myself very much included, thank you for all your contributions to this beautiful thing we call survival horror, and for just being a very cool dude.
All right. Well, thank you for having me. I appreciate all the fan reach out. It's amazing, and channels like you just keep it up, because it keeps everybody connected, informed, and it keeps that passion right where it needs to be. So companies and developers like Capcom keep on making the games because they see all this stuff.
That's what it's all about. It's all about just keeping us all connected. And on that note, I'll say what I always say at the end of every episode, and that is, let's survive together, guys, and peace out. Thanks, Nick.
See you in Raccoon City.